Tucked back in the shadows against this wall is a chili piquin. It is a native pepper and does very well in the understory. It doesn't need a lot of light to bloom and to put on these tiny red peppers. It's still a little bit early in the season for this one to have a lot of peppers, but these tiny little round red fruits are as hot as blazes. Still a big treat for the birds though. They love it. They're not affected by the heat the way we are.
Just a little bit later in the season, these pepper bushes will be full of these flaming hot red tiny peppers. By any measure, one of the most beautiful wildflowers in a Texas summer is the American basket flower, seen here blooming at Oak Point Park in Plano. These are wild. They grow naturally on our Blackland prairie. Our local variety is usually a dark purple, but they come in some other shades. The basket flower name comes from the look of an Indian basket on the buds and underneath the flowers. They range from a deep fuchsia color to a very pale lavender, almost white. Some have white centers, some have darker centers. I believe it's just genetics and the luck of the draw which ones you have. Many of the local ones seem to be the darker colors, but this lighter color is also popular. The lighter version is more common in seed mixes, but is also found in the wild. All sorts of pollinators love basket flowers, from very large butterflies down to the small skipper butterflies and every kind of native bee imaginable, plus honeybees and other things. Birds eat the seeds, so it's simply one of the best plants you can plant for wildlife. Beautiful Datura wrightii starts off the evening as a tightly wound bud that quickly unfurls to make a beautiful open white trumpet-shaped flower. It's a very toxic shrub, and so care needs to be taken in the landscape with placement of a datura. Those night-blooming flowers are pollinated by long-tongued moths that are perfectly shaped to achieve pollination. By now, almost everyone has seen purple coneflowers somewhere. They're readily available at stores and in home improvement centers and nurseries. And there are even some selections with larger flowers, slightly different colored flowers, or other improvements. With improvements, though, come problems. Whenever something gets very popular, it's possible for diseases to get a foothold and become a nuisance in the population. And this has happened with the echinaceas. We're starting to see a disease called aster yellows cropping up frequently in echinaceas. It's spread by a small insect and it causes deformities in the tops of the flowers. They may look interesting, but they indicate a diseased plant. A plant that shows misshapen flowers or extra leaves or bracts within the flower head should be removed completely. But there are good reasons they are popular plants. They're not only popular with people, they're popular with all sorts of pollinators and birds and other wildlife. Right now, most echinaceas are done blooming for the season, but this is what you would see if we took a walk today. Texas bluebells are iconic Texas wildflowers that used to be more common in the wild than they are today. Because they're short-lived perennials, they need to be left to go to seed. Otherwise, new ones won't crop up, and your patch will eventually die out. So over-harvesting to take home for bouquets and mowing before the seed heads matured have contributed to the decline of this beautiful wildflower in nature. This flower is actually the basis for the commercial cut flower Lysianthus and has been used in Europe for a long time as a garden flower. From the interesting blue-green foliage to the beautifully twisted buds to the extravagant blooms that overtop these wildflowers, every part of a Texas bluebell is beautiful. The seeds are extremely fine and must make good contact with damp soil to germinate. It may take several years for Texas bluebells to germinate once sown.
I really wasn't so sure that I was going to be able to find you any bluebonnets to take a photo of or a movie of at this time in the fall. It's mid to late October, and here are bluebonnet seedlings. These will bloom in the spring. They're going to have their leaves out all winter, staying as this low green rosette in the grass. And then those blooms will come up and bloom in about April and May here in North Texas. So you have to plan for these ahead. They want to sprout and have some cold weather over the winter before they will bloom in the spring. You don't want to plant them in the spring. It doesn't work. They need that winter to really bloom for you in the spring.
Bluebonnets are our Texas state flower and the symbol of the Native Plant Society of Texas. Frequently planted along the roadsides, they're also one of the most recognizable wildflowers in all of Texas. Bluebonnet seeds are extremely tough and benefit from a soak in hot water or some roughening before planting. It takes a while for some bluebonnet seeds to germinate. They may lie dormant for many years before they sprout. Be sure to let at least some of the seeds mature so that you'll have an ever-renewing crop of bluebonnets each year. Barbara's buttons are one of my very favorite mid-spring North Texas wildflowers. They are members of the aster family, even though they don't look like a typical daisy, and because they have all those tiny flowers packed into a flower head, they're very attractive to bees and butterflies and all kinds of small wildlife. The clumps are neat and circular with evergreen basal rosettes of strap-like leaves, so they look neat year-round. And the flowers are just beautiful as well as lightly fragrant. They grow in places that not too many things can manage. On dry, rocky, tough soils, a little bit of a drainage slope is a great thing, but not too wet. Here you can see that white, plain, bare rock in the background, sort of a chalky washout, and yet this field is full of Barbara's buttons at Oak Point Park in Plano. It's a tough prairie survivor, generally grows where the grasses are a little shorter and there's less competition from other things. But if you can get this plant, it is a fabulous landscape performer. Here it's mixed with liatris and paintbrush. The butterflies are so excited about this plant that sometimes we actually host watch parties and put lawn chairs out in our Barbara's button patch just to watch the butterflies that come. Horsemint is a colorful annual plant. It can stay low, blooming at about a foot tall, or be as tall as 3 to 4 feet in really good conditions. The foliage is intensely lemon scented, and both the foliage and the flowers can be eaten or used to make teas. Typically, this monarda is white flowered with purple bracts. But sometimes you'll find one that's all purple with both purple flowers and purple bracts, occasionally, very occasionally, all white.
This is the seed head of a Monarda citriodora, a horsemint or lemon mint. This is all that's left in the fall after the bloom season, because these are annuals. That if you take one of those little heads and crush it up and sniff, you'll smell that distinct smell of lemon still, even at this season. Beautiful purple flower spikes when they are blooming.